Imagine standing on the floor of a steel mill. The heat is so intense you can feel it penetrating through your work clothes. The noise is deafening, and above your head, suspended by cables and chains, there's a gigantic container filled with liquid steel at 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. 3,000 tons of molten metal glowing with an incandescent orange. One single mechanical failure, and everything you know disappears in an instant. This isn't a horror movie. This was a normal Tuesday at the great American steel mills. For decades, steel workers in Pittsburgh, Gary, Bethlehem, and Birmingham lived this reality every shift. The machine that made mass steel production possible was the same one that could become their death sentence. It was called the ladle crane, and it was as essential to American industry as it was dangerous to those who worked beneath it. But to understand why thousands of men accepted this job, we need to go back to the moment when America decided to become the steel powerhouse of the world. In the year 1886, something changed in America. Andrew Carnegie didn't just want to produce steel, he wanted to produce it faster and in greater quantities than any other nation in the world. The problem was simple but brutal. When you pull steel from the furnace, it's liquid, burning at temperatures that can melt almost anything. You need to move it fast from the furnace to the molds before it solidifies. The old methods were slow and dangerous. It took dozens of men with primitive tools, and accidents were constant. The solution was a machine that defied all logic of safety. A massive bridge crane that could lift giant containers filled with molten steel and move them across the entire plant. Think about it for a second. We're talking about a metal vessel that weighs tons even when empty, filled to the brim with liquid steel. The combined weight could easily reach 3,000 tons in the largest plants. And all of this suspended at 50, 60, 70 feet high, moving slowly over the heads of hundreds of workers. The engineers knew it was dangerous. The plant owners knew it was dangerous. Hell, even the politicians knew it was dangerous. But they also knew something more important to them. Without these machines, America could never compete with Europe. The demand for steel was insatiable. Skyscrapers, bridges, railroads, warships. All of America's explosive growth depended on producing more steel, faster. And that meant someone had to stand underneath that giant ladle. Here comes the question you're probably asking yourself. Why would anyone accept that job? The answer is complex and says a lot about the America of that era. For many newly arrived immigrants, working in the steel mills was the only real option. Poles, Italians, Slavs, Irish. They arrived at Ellis Island with nothing but the clothes they wore and the hope of a better life. The steel plants paid better than almost any other job available to someone without formal education or without English. A man could earn enough to support his family, buy a small house, and maybe, just maybe, give his children opportunities he never had. But the price was high, very high. Every day when you crossed through the plant gates, you knew you might not come back, and I'm not exaggerating for dramatic effect. The statistics were brutal. In the year 1907, at a single U.S. steel plant in Pittsburgh, 46 men died in accidents related to handling molten metal. 46 families destroyed in just 12 months. And that was just one plant. Multiply that across the hundreds of steel mills operating across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and you start to understand the scale of human sacrifice that built modern America. The veterans developed a sixth sense for survival. They taught you to never turn your back on the crane, to always keep a clear escape route, to recognize the sound of a cable about to break, that little metallic snap that meant you had seconds, literally seconds, to get out of the way. Some workers carried lucky charms, others prayed before each shift. Most simply developed a kind of pragmatic fatalism. You knew it could happen, but you couldn't live every second with that fear or you'd go crazy. The day started before dawn for most men. They'd wake up in their small homes in the mill towns, houses so close together you could hear your neighbor coughing through the walls. The walk to the plant was always the same, past the same corner store where old men gathered, past the church where their wives would light candles for their safety, and then through those massive iron gates into what felt like another world entirely, a world of fire and noise and constant grinding danger. And let me ask you something. Have you ever seen molten steel up close? Not in a photo or a video, but in person. Because there's something hypnotic and terrifying about that bright orange light. It looks almost beautiful until you remember it's so hot it can carbonize human flesh instantly. The most experienced workers knew stories. Oh yes, everyone knew stories. About the guy who slipped and his boot grazed a splash, lost 3 toes. About the group of men who were eating their lunch when a cable burst above them. They didn't even have time to scream. The younger guys, the ones fresh off the boat or fresh out of high school, they'd listen to these stories during breaks. Some would laugh nervously, trying to hide their fear. Others would go pale. The old-timers could always tell who would last and who wouldn't. It wasn't about strength or intelligence. It was about something deeper. A kind of mental toughness mixed with the ability to focus completely on the task at hand while simultaneously being aware of everything happening around you. It was an exhausting way to work, but it was the only way to survive. But here's the part most people don't understand. Despite the constant danger, or maybe because of it, a unique culture developed among these workers. A brotherhood forged under extreme conditions. When your life depends on the guy next to you doing his job perfectly, you develop a level of trust and loyalty that's hard to find anywhere else. These men looked out for each other. If a rookie made a stupid mistake, you didn't report him. You took him aside and taught him the right way, because his mistake could kill you too. The crane operators were considered the elite. These guys literally controlled everyone else's life and death. Sitting in small, hot cabins at great heights, they moved levers and watched the plant floor like hawks. A good operator could feel when something wasn't right. Maybe the crane moved a little differently. Maybe there was a strange vibration. They developed an almost telepathic connection with their machines. And they had to because a misjudgment of a few feet could mean disaster. Training to be a crane operator took years. You didn't just climb up there and start moving 3,000 tons of molten death around. You started on the ground, learning every bolt and cable of the machine. You watched the experienced operators until you could predict their every move. You learned to read the plant floor like a book, knowing where every man should be at every moment. And even then, your first solo run was terrifying. Every operator remembered their first time, the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that one wrong move and people die. In the year 1918, something changed at the Bethlehem steel plant in Pennsylvania. It was a December day, cold outside, but hellish inside, as always. The afternoon shift was in full operation, 120 men working under the cranes. A veteran operator named Mike Kovacs had been on the job for 16 years. He knew that machine better than his own wife, the other workers said. That day he was moving an especially large ladle, 3,200 tons of molten steel destined for beams for a new skyscraper in New York. Kovacs had started his shift like any other. He'd climbed the narrow ladder to his cabin, checked all the controls, tested the response of each lever. Everything seemed normal. The morning pours had gone smoothly. The plant superintendent had even commented on what a good day they were having. No injuries, no equipment failures, production ahead of schedule. In the steel business, days like that were rare enough that you noticed them. Everything was going according to plan until it wasn't. Midway through the run, one of the main cables began to fray. Kovacs felt it before he saw it. That specific vibration he had learned to fear. He had maybe 30 seconds to make a decision. He could drop the ladle immediately onto a cleared area of the plant, destroying expensive equipment but saving lives. Or he could try to reach the pouring zone and complete the normal procedure. Every second he waited, the cable weakened more. And below him, men who had no idea what was happening continued working. The tension in that moment must have been unbearable. Think about the responsibility. More than 100 lives depending on your correct decision in the next few seconds. There's no time to consult a supervisor. There's no procedures manual to reference. Just you, your experience, and the knowledge that any choice could be the wrong one. Kovacs knew most of these men by name. He'd had dinner at their houses. He knew their kids. That kind of thing makes the weight even heavier. The men on the floor finally noticed something was wrong when Kovacs started ringing the emergency alarm. A sharp, piercing sound that meant only one thing: run. But not panic, run. Controlled evacuation run. The kind of run you'd practiced a dozen times but never thought you'd actually need. Every man in that plant had been through the drills. They knew where to go. They knew to help anyone who fell. They knew not to bunch up at the exits. But knowing something in a drill and doing it when 3,000 tons of liquid fire hangs above you are two very different things. Panic spread like fire. Men who had been working calmly seconds before were now running toward the exits. But there was a problem. The plant layout meant some workers were trapped in sections where they couldn't get out quickly. They were under the ladle's trajectory if it fell. Kovacs knew it. He could see them from his elevated cabin. Small figures running, some stumbling, one fell, and his companions stopped to help him up, even knowing the risk. That's the kind of men they were. Even facing death, they wouldn't leave a brother behind. In that moment, Kovacs did something that engineers said afterward was impossible. He started accelerating the crane. Normally, these machines moved slowly and deliberately. Moving such a massive load quickly was asking it to destabilize and fall. But Kovacs bet his life and the lives of everyone else that he could keep it stable long enough to get it past where those men were trapped. The cable was breaking strand by strand. You can imagine the sound. Each little metallic burst like a gunshot in hell. Each one telling Kovacs he had less time than he thought. The ladle was now swaying visibly. Molten steel began splashing over the sides. Drops the size of baseballs fell to the floor, creating small explosions of sparks and smoke. The men ran dodging these deadly drops. The radiant heat was so intense that some felt their skin burning even at a distance. And still, Kovacs kept pushing the crane forward. Faster, just a little more. His hands were locked on the controls. His eyes never left those trapped men below. Just a few more feet, just a few more seconds. Finally, the ladle passed over the last section where trapped workers were. Kovacs immediately began the emergency descent procedure, but it was too late. The main cable broke completely with a sound like a cannon shot. 3,200 tons of molten steel fell from a height of 60 feet. The impact was cataclysmic. The container shattered when it hit the reinforced concrete floor. Liquid steel exploded in all directions like a burning wave. It destroyed machinery that had cost millions of dollars. It created a crater in the plant floor that took weeks to repair. The heat was so intense, it cracked support beams 50 feet away. But it didn't kill anyone. 120 men had been working in that plant. 120 men went home that night. Some with minor burns, some in shock, but all alive. Kovacs came out of his cabin shaking. He had bet everything and had won. But the experience changed him. Other operators who were there said he was never the same after that day. The burden of knowing how close they had been to disaster never left him. He'd see it in his dreams, that moment of decision, playing it over and over, wondering if he'd made the right call or just gotten lucky. The company did a complete investigation. They discovered the cable had been inspected just 2 days before and had passed, but the extreme and constant stresses these cables were subjected to meant they could fail at any moment without prior warning. It wasn't anyone's fault specifically. It was simply the nature of the work. You were playing Russian roulette every day and hoping your number wouldn't come up. The investigation report recommended more frequent inspections, better cable technology, improved warning systems. All good ideas. All still not enough to eliminate the fundamental risk. Plants began implementing new safety measures after incidents like this: more frequent inspections, better backup systems, clearer evacuation protocols. Some plants installed nets to catch splashing metal. Others redesigned their layouts to minimize the number of workers who had to be under the cranes during pours. But fundamentally, the operation remained the same: large amounts of molten metal suspended over human workers. The risk never really disappeared. It was just managed a bit better. By the 1950s, the most modern plants had developed systems where there were fewer workers directly under the cranes during critical operations. Automation began replacing some of the most dangerous jobs. Remote controls allowed operators to work from safer positions. Better metallurgy meant cables that were stronger and more predictable. But even today, in the few steel plants that remain operating in the United States, these giant cranes still exist. They still move molten metal over workers' heads. The scale may be smaller, the precautions better, but the basic principle remains the same. The men who worked under those machines during the golden age of American steel were in many ways the invisible backbone of the modern nation. Every tall building, every bridge you cross, every piece of infrastructure that enables our modern life was made possible because someone was willing to stand under 3,000 tons of liquid death and trust that the machine wouldn't fail that day. Some days the machine delivered, some days it didn't. And the families who lost fathers, brothers, sons to these metal beasts never forgot the real price of progress. Mike Kovacs worked another 12 years after that December incident. He retired in 1930 with a small pension and hands that trembled every time he heard loud metallic sounds. He died in 1947. At his funeral, more than 200 steelworkers showed up to pay their respects. Men who had been in that plant that day, men whose fathers had worked alongside him. A brotherhood literally forged under fire. The headstone his children gave him has only his name and dates. But those who knew him knew what it really meant. A man who kept his head cool when hell was about to break loose and saved everyone under his care at the most critical moment possible. They still talk about him in the old mill towns. The operator who moved faster than physics said he could and saved 120 lives in 30 seconds.